Hello, welcome to Human Systems Engineering 542. Today we're going to be discussing more about displays in part 2 of Module 4. We're going to go a little bit more into what we can display to our users, how we would go about displaying an error, and when do we display this information and errors to our user. We, as we've said before, have a lot of automation and we have a lot of technology and we have a lot of displays, much more than we did even 20 years ago. We are really in more of an information overloaded society at this point where everything is at our fingertips. Every question we could ever need the answer to is right there with a simple lookup. We, in displaying all of this information, as the designers, we really need to know when we are supposed to bring that information forward to the user at the correct time. We have a lot of screens that inform the users of various statuses and progressions to their goal state that inform decisions. And again, this is what we've been discussing about the importance of displays. What we talked about in the last section was really the monitoring displays, the integrative displays, and more heads-up, kind of that virtual reality type of display. And we had 4 main design principles that your book talks about, which was attention, perception, memory, and the mental models. So designing with those principles in mind and what those main principles were. And we touched on those environmental considerations. Where is your user, viewing the display? Is there sunlight blocking it? What's the illumination level of the room? And how do we improve this incoming information for the users to really guide that cognition, metacognition, and decision-making process? Because ultimately, we're using this information to make good choices. So 2 of the things that we had not discussed yet in part 1 was our displays through graphs and our displays we touched on a little bit in the map department. Graphs are very nice consolidation of data that you can get visually. And graphs can really help us in a quick way to make a decision or to extract data, especially when we are doing things that require large computations and large sets of data where we need to quickly analyze which one is performing better or which one is more this or that. We want to display the information to the users in the best possible way through the graphs. But with graphs, there's a lot of options on how you can use that information to display it. People sometimes get a little bit panicky and can get overwhelmed easily because graphs will sometimes mean math, and math might sometimes cause people stress. And so things that we're more used to might be like a histogram or a bar chart, pie charts, scatter plots, box plots. But nonetheless, a graph is what you use as a visual representation to help your user interpret the information to then make a good decision, or a decision, maybe not good, whatever that decision might be. And again, graphs can overwhelm the user if it's not familiar. Shape and color to the graph have no natural mapping for our brain's limitation capability. Shape and color don't pertain to any specific thing in our minds. We can display things on the graph such as interval data, which is our integers, our ordinal data where we have meaningful order, or nominal data where we have categories like male, female, or something where it's in a category of some sort. And over here, it's kind of a little nice infographic that shows the nominal and ordinal data are more the pie charts and bar charts, and that interval and ratio data goes into the box plots and histograms. So those are just a few different scales as a reminder of what graphs are, and we've all used them at some point in our lives on presentations and in data collection science classes where we have to present that, or math. How do we improve this display to the user? What can we do with the graphs that can help us? Well, when we are choosing colors, we want to make sure that we're using a consistent color scheme that has no more than 7 colors. That can be very overwhelming. The more data that's included on one section can be really, really overwhelming. We want to make sure it's well labeled, that we always have a title, that we always label the axes, that we always start at a 0 the interception between the y and the x-axis is always that 0 kind of baseline. We want to make it as uncluttered as possible, so as simple as possible, while keeping it accurate. So we don't want to manipulate our data, because what happens is not only are we relying on the graphs in our displays to inform our decision, but the graphs, as we'll talk about in a minute, can be manipulated, and it can cause the data to look something different than someone might actually needed to have may have had to interpret it differently than it looks like. So we want to make sure that we're doing all we can when we use these graphs, that it's valid and not misconstrued data, that it's clean, it's not cluttered, that the labels are near the lines. So this graph is actually a little bit overwhelming as well, and it doesn't, it has to do with the flower here, so nothing important to the class. But what is nice is that this label is actually near this line. And so just that proximity, which we've talked about a little bit before, we're not trying to search over here to figure out all these different things. We actually we remind them right there that that's the line that it is. And again, there's nuances with some maybe APA requirements on how you can do that, but it is helpful for the users to have proximity to that information. Also, if you're comparing different slopes and lines, that you don't have one here and then another graph here, and they're trying to compare across this and keep that in their working memory, but that you actually just put it all on the same thing, so they can see it more easily if it's all put together and kind of overlaid on top of each other. You can also include time as a measurement. There's some graphs that have animated time. That can, depending on how it's used, can tax the working memory of the user. So we want to make sure when you're using time, we're going from left to right, past to future, more of those intuitive things that map what we have in our mental model for that, how we perceive time, right, and how we read from left to right, past to future. When we just said the manipulation of our data, this was just a quick search online. You can see how people manipulate data when they're trying to mislead you in an article or change your mind on a certain topic. And two of the bigger ones, there were 5 on this website that I found, but one of them is omitting the baseline. So as we talked about, really important is that this here is always 0. If this now starts at 50, then this is looking way more significant than this difference. And people do that intentionally to say, whoa, look at that, because our eyes are led to the stark difference between those two without checking the details of, oh, it's starting here. Got it. So you want to make sure that you're not doing that to mislead your users in making a good informed decision. Another thing is using the wrong graph, and we'll talk about in a second, that pie charts can be a little bit confusing and misconstrued as well. So pie charts are used to compare parts of the whole, not the difference between our groups. So we're really comparing, it's actually represented over here. Team A is at 50%, so Team A is at 50. So when we're using, sometimes we might just be using the wrong graph when we're trying to compare 3 items. People use this pie chart to compare the 3 when really this is the more accurate representation. So we want to make sure that we're using the correct graph to represent our data for what type of data it is we are representing. And pie charts in general can just be confusing and difficult to judge due to their circular nature. It's especially when we have more than a few comparisons, and if, to figure out if this is true, we have to sit here and add all these together to make sure that that's 100, and that's not even looking like that is 100. Again, I can't do that quickly. I can see here that looks like 18.8% of the peacock last name is the most popular, but that's about all I can extract from this information. 3D figures can also challenge some accurate comparisons. So as our technology is improving and we're getting, really cool technology with representing data, and we're able to kind of manipulate the data in real time, the 3D figures can pose a challenge depending on how it's done as well. So again, understanding that graphs are a great visual display, but be careful and be be cautious that it's not causing an inaccurate read to your users, and that it's something that is intuitive, that they can really understand. Maps, these, as we've discussed a little bit in the last topic, really need to be legible and oriented well. All of these, it sounds pretty repetitive, but it's very important that the clutter, is reduced, that legibility is high, that that the scales are accurate. In some cases, we can, if you're using it on your phone, that we can manipulate where we are in space and time, so that, north is, where it makes sense to be, versus, well, north isn't just north, it directs you where you are in facing directly. So the screen will actually rotate. And a nice thing is that we want layers of information and the ability to change the depth of the route. So we want to be able to kind of toggle back and forth between this zoomed in view versus the wide scale of whatever state you're looking at, or maybe whatever city you're looking at, and then whatever country you're looking at, right? That we can kind of go in and out. Google Maps does a great job of this. 3D can be helpful, but you have to think of who is using your map functionality and how often are they doing this. Are they a typical user or a non-user of maps? I mean, most people have used a map, so there's a level of understanding there. But when you start using it for your career, you're starting to use it as a firefighter for fighting fires from an aerial view, the demand is different. So it really is dependent on what the context of the map use is. But maps in general are used for planning your route, and it's more of a pre-planned type of activity, as well as, in the moment, getting from one location to another. So maps are kind of in and of themselves their own type of display. How do we display errors? So we talked about alerts and different layers of alerts, and those are more for, in the moment, this is urgent, this is a priority. But what about an error? Just you goofed up in the program, or it has an error in giving you the correct output. Your thermometer, your Nest, whatever thermostat you're using, is just says unable to read. What do you do then? These types of errors that we're going to talk about is more related to the display itself, not that interface, not that interaction. That is also another topic when we talk about how the user is actually interacting and inputting information into the system. That's more the human-computer interaction and the automation process. Right now, I'm just talking about the display itself. If there's an error within it, how does it tell you, hey, there's an issue here, or hey, we're not giving you the right read right now. So again, the user here is not inputting information, they're just interpreting the information from the system and the display. So there's different, this one's kind of silly, but awesome, there's a warning, and then oh no, those are kind of the levels, right, that we're accustomed to. There's some type of error. So what we want to be when we give the error in the display is we want to be short, direct, and meaningful. When it says error code 40001, that means nothing to us as the user. We would have to go and actually look at a manual or type in error code 40001 and go try to find what error that is. It's nice right here if the message is indicative of what that error code is actually meaning, right? So if it's in your car, no oil, you know that it doesn't have oil anymore. And if it says some weird symbol that you can't recognize, you pull your hair out trying to figure out and find what that means. But when you do, hopefully that message of what it is very direct. You're out of oil. You have put in the wrong, or I guess in this one you didn't, this is just reporting to you, so you didn't input anything, but the system, the printer is malfunctioning because paper jam here. So the placement also needs to be in the location of the error. You need to grab the attention, as always. If you don't have the user's attention, then the error is going to go unnoticed. So you need to make sure that not only do you get their attention, but that placement is in the location of the error as much as you can, give or take, right? So our dash is right in front of the hood where you're going to have those errors in, and on the computer, if you have some type of error code that it's associated to this box is not working and this is why, and it's close there. We want to use color to attract attention. Color, especially red, especially for errors, red or yellow, generally kind of flag that attention. And we want to make sure that if it's an overlay on a screen that's popping up with the error of some sort, that it's in different fonts, it's in different style, and again, that it's written in a different color. So a lot of these two, they're a little blurry, but you kind of get the point that, well, this one, someone put in their email address and it's wrong, so it's flagging it, so that's an interaction. But it's nice that it says right underneath it, hey, this is the issue. And what you want to do is like, here, enter a valid email. Here are the requirements. Here, this is why it didn't work. And so not only for error processing, you're just trying to get their attention and then alert them in something different to get that attention and hold it of what that error is. If it's an interaction that we'll see later, you're guiding them through the display or through the interface more of what to do and step by step. So when do we display things? Well, we have to understand that the user has memory limitations. They have time demands, that when say you're a pilot and you're flying and you have all these instruments to be, looking at all the displays of, that there is a priority to which ones you even care if there's errors on. And I know that's a little bit of a scary thought, but not everything is an emergency. Not everything's life or death at that one moment. If you're driving your car and your oil light goes on, it doesn't mean that you have to pull over right that instant. Well, actually, if your light goes on, you probably do, but there is one that's like a warning that says in 1,000 miles or 500 miles, you need to go get your oil changed. It kind of gives you a pre-warning. But yes, if your car starts smoking and the light goes on simultaneously, please pull over. But as the user is engaged in all these activities, and they're going to be also on their phones and all sorts of things, you need to know when to display the information, at what time, how they're going to be interpreting multiple sources of information to complete the full decision. So you might have to consult this display, and then you have to go to this display, and you have to go to this display, and you have to kind of be putting it together, integrating the information. And as the designer, you need to really understand all the steps that user is taking to get to that point, to get to that final decision, to get to the correct end goal. And so really, the heart of when to display is going to come through your usability testing, really a deep understanding in the mental models and how your users do their day-to-day job. And that is a lot of people's jobs right now, is figuring out, okay, how do we alert the driver when they're in an autonomous vehicle? How do we alert the pilot when they're in like this continuous mode of autopiloting and babysitting all of the displays and the machines and all of that? How do we get them the right information so they know when to take over? So when to display really comes through working on that one specific instance with the users that are going to be using it in that time frame. So in summary, this is just a kind of a spin-off, two-part of the display, but we're concluding that we have guidelines to what we want to include in the display. We want, it follows the same pattern. We need attention concepts, perception concepts, how our memories work, and those mental models, and the environment. And we had some helpful tips on how we displayed the graphs and the maps, and how those two types of displays are unique enough. They're different types of displays, but they are in their own type of display. And how we can inform our users of error in the display, not maybe something urgent, but hey, you might want to check on this, or hey, this isn't working and it's not displaying the right output. And the information how we inform the information and the errors to the user needs to be done with good timing, with enough time for that user to not only see, take in, and integrate that information, but that they make a good decision with it. Thank you.